I would like to remind you that for more Microsoft webcasts, you can go to microsoft.com/webcast. Thanks again for joining us for today's presentation, Sites and Templates in SharePoint Server 2007 and Visual Studio. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters, Mike Benkovich and Lynn Langett. Lynn, you now have the floor.
Hi everyone, welcome. I see a lot of familiar names in the attendee queue, so if you're coming back to hear more of our SharePoint for Developers webcast series, thanks for coming back, and hopefully we'll have a good hour together. If you're new to the series, welcome as well. I'm Lynn Langett. I'm a Microsoft Developer Network evangelist, and in addition to doing webcasts, I give talks to developers on various topics. And you see my blog address on the bottom of the first slide here. Very important resource for you. Lots of information post-webcast about this webcast and the other ones in our series. This is part 10 or 11. I'm losing track here.
I think it's 11.
Yeah, in our 13-part series. It's grown and grown for our SharePoint developers. For those of you that were on last week, we had a show on web part development, and we intended to include workflow, but we ran out of time. So I've had several email requests on this. We've got this scheduled on July 6th at noon Pacific Standard Time, and that link will become live for registration in a week or so. Joining me today is Mike Benkovich. So Mike, you want to say hi?
Sure. And I'm a developer evangelist for Microsoft as well. I do the MSDN events, and Lynn has been doing the SharePoint stuff for quite a while, and so we've got some great content here today. What's today's topic?
It is looking at sites and templates and developing and working with them in SharePoint.
Well, great. Why don't we dive right into it, and I'll let you take the floor. Unless you need anything, I'll keep an eye on the questions and try to answer them. If there's good questions in the queue, I'll interrupt you and let you know.
Great, and just one more point of information for those listening in. The way that we run our webcast series is I have a few slides, mostly demos to get you seeing the technology and how to work with it. And Mike or whoever, me if I'm not presenting, will monitor the question queue. And we really want to make this webcast work for you, so please do ask lots of questions and we will answer them throughout the presentation and after the presentation if they run that long. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be focusing on today. In today's presentation, similar to a lot of the other developer ones, we first need to understand what objects it is we're going to be working with. One of the core concepts for you as developers is to understand what objects you are going to be working with and how to manipulate them and where you manipulate them. So in terms of sites, we have not only sites, we have sites, site collections, templates, page templates, master pages. Also similar to some of the other development topics that we've talked about, for example, web parts and some of the other things, we're going to take the same approach from a developer standpoint. What I mean by that is we're first going to look at the objects so we understand them inside of a live portal server. Then we're going to look at the possibilities for manipulation inside of the server itself, because this is a sort of a unique developer paradigm in SharePoint that you can actually create objects if you have appropriate permissions inside of the portal, really with writing no code at all. We're then going to move on to looking at customizing objects that you've either started with or maybe customized inside of the portal server inside of one of two developer environments. And the developer environments are Office SharePoint Designer 2007 and Visual Studio. When we look at those two developer environments, we'll compare and contrast what it is you can do in terms of these objects in those environments and what you need to do as a developer to set up those environments to support working on these types of objects. So again, I'm trying to be similar structurally when we're looking at the different objects so that you can understand the sort of the thought process behind customization in SharePoint. Prerequisites for this session are general familiarity with the portal itself and ASP.NET version 2.0 development experience. If you are new to the series, you might be surprised by the second prerequisite, and it is really important for you to understand, particularly in this topic area of sites and pages, that SharePoint 2007 is an ASP.NET 2.0 implementation. It is 100% compliant with ASP.NET 2.0. It is really just a sort of subset of what you get in terms of ASP.NET 2.0. You can use ASP.NET 2.0 pages in a SharePoint site, and you have complete interoperability. So if you are new to ASP.NET or ASP.NET 2.0, that's sort of a platform that you want to be familiar with before you dive into SharePoint. And we can give you resources on that as well.
And that's very true. I mean, even to the point of going to like the membership provider and other things that's available in ASP.NET too.
Yeah, very much so. So again,
maybe we should do a webcast on how to do that.
I know, huh? So if master pages, membership provider, these types of terms are unfamiliar to you, I can just tell you right off, you're going to want to pop over to the ASP.NET website, and there's lots and lots of samples and information there, because SharePoint is built on top of all this stuff. Okay, in terms of an agenda, we're going to look specifically at the core objects, and we're going to tour around the portal a little bit and understand what you get out of the box. We're going to look at sites, site collections, site templates, page templates, and master pages, so that you can understand what's there, what you can build inside, what you can customize, and what you can use as a starting point before you crack open some of the development environments. Once we do that, we're then going to go into the modifications. So the first sort of consideration to think about is why you would want to use something called a site template. If you do bring ASP.NET development or even ASP development experience to the table, you're probably kind of unfamiliar with this idea of a site template. Your experience probably consists of creating ASPX pages and perhaps ASCX controls and maybe HTTP handlers. What a site template is and does is conceptually similar to an ASPX page that's designed in an object-oriented fashion. And what I mean by that is it's a container. It's a container for SharePoint objects. So yes, indeed, you actually could place ASCX controls on a site template, but what you would rather do is use specific controls to SharePoint web parts. And again, I don't want to make assumptions. If you were on last week's webcast, we dived into web parts a bit, but maybe you weren't. So a web part is a specific type of control that's native to SharePoint. It is used to display little chunks of UI, and it has distinct properties that integrate with SharePoint. For example, security and the ability to select from a gallery and so on and so forth. So it's a particular type of a UI control. Site templates also can be containers for other SharePoint objects, such as workflows. There's something called a content type, which is basically a type of an XSD schema. So it's more than an ASPX page, is really what I'm trying to impart here. And you might also associate permissions with a specific template and CSS. So it is almost a complete website. It's somewhere between a group of ASPX pages and a complete website. That's conceptually what a site template is. Mike, do you want to add anything to that?
No. I think you got it pretty much here. There's no questions about what we've covered so far.
Okay. All right. Well, let's keep going. Where are these templates used? Now, again, this is, you have to understand when you're working with SharePoint, these new names for objects. This is what one of the things I found that challenges ASP.NET developers. We as ASP.NET developers are used to pages and websites and maybe controls. We have whole different names for things. So we have sites, which is a group of pages, and we have something called a site collection and a subsite. Then a particular type of a site is a my site. So what are all of these things? A site collection is a group of sites that has similar objects associated with it. That's what it is logically. Physically, it is a URL that appears like a subsite underneath the main site. So in other words, www.something.com whack collection whack name of subsite. Okay? So collections are really sort of conceptually like containers or folders for groups of subsites with common objects. And site collections are not required. Site collections there are some that come as a default with SharePoint, and some people choose to implement them for efficiency because you're associating same objects with more than one subsite. So templates are used on sites, collections, subsites, and my sites. My sites, if you're not familiar, are personal or individual sites, and this is a feature of the full product. It does not come with Windows SharePoint Services, the free version.
Right.
If you have the full, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say the My Sites is part of MOS, where the other ones are all part of WSS3, right?
Right. It's a type of a site. Basically, it's a template.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, you can customize that template. So with that, we probably should start taking a look at some of these core objects. So let me jump out into the desktop here and go bring up my virtual PC. There we go. How's that looking, Mike? Pretty good?
Looks good. You just make sure that everyone pushes the F5 key so they can get to see the whole screen.
Okay. Okay. So what I've got here is I've got a built-up portal, and inside of it, it's just the default portal, nothing really special. This comes from a virtual image that you can actually access on MSDN Virtual Labs. One of the questions that we often get from developers is, I don't really have time to set up a development environment, and I really just want to play around with this because, you've kind of piqued my interest. So if you go to MSDN or even TechNet Virtual Labs, you can have access to a fully set up portal environment. Now, there is a time limit on it. It's a 90-minute time limit, but really you can do anything you want to it, and then it'll reset, which is really kind of a neat opportunity if you want to take a look at it. So,
Hey, Lynn?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the questions that's in here is that, to start with an existing template and then modify it. My understanding is that you can take any site that's out there, save it, and use that as a starting place for what we're going to do, right?
Oh, that is just such a perfect lead into what I'm going to show you.
Oh, great. So,
yeah, because if I go up over here and I'm running this as an admin and I click Create a Site, what I'm going to be presented with is a list of the default templates. Now, in a default installation, you have a few templates to pick from. I think there are around 12 or 15. One of the things that you're going to want to do right away, and I'll put these links on my blog right after this webcast, is you're going to want to go out and download what are called the Fabulous 40. And the Fabulous 40 are 40 additional site templates that we've made available for free that have complete source code to them. And you're going to want to pull them in, take a look at them, see which ones might work for you. And you can just think of them as starting points so that you don't have to design custom templates from scratch. They might work as designed because they are professionally designed. But if not, then you can crack those open. So I'm just going to call this test for Lynn and give this guy an address. And you note the address is a URL. And here are the existing templates. And you can see they're categorized into collaboration, meetings, enterprise, and application templates. And if I click on them, it actually gives me a little preview, and these are the web parts showing up here. And then it gives a description. Now, of course, you have flexibility in terms of customizing these sites by adding or removing or customizing web parts once you've created them. But if your business requirements were such that you needed to have a standard template, that's kind of what we're talking about in this webcast, how you would create that and then make that available inside of here. So my company template is basically what you'd see.
hey, Lynn?
Yes.
These, the Fabulous 40 you're talking about, all these,
Mm-hmm.
the starter kit or templates.
Yeah.
When I go out to the virtual labs, are these also available in there so when you resets I can use any of them?
That's a great point. I do not believe that the Fabulous 40 are installed in the virtual labs. So that is that's not in the virtual labs as far as I've seen. That's a great suggestion now. I'm actually working on some evangelism stuff with the SharePoint team, so I'll probably pass that along to them.
That would be a good thing because
Yeah.
then you get a nice start.
Play with them, right? That's
Yeah.
a great idea. So anyway, so let's just quickly make a site here. So I want to just browse. Just we've got collaboration, meeting, enterprise, and these templates are only available if you have the enterprise edition of Office. So things like a report center, and then the most common applications, so like a knowledge base, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to go to collaboration, and I'm going to publish a document workspace. The permission model is like NTFS, so you're going to inherit, and then you want to have a link, and we're just going to list it in this directory so we can find it. So once we create this will look like a web page basically, and it's being created out of an XML template with some web parts on it. And then as Mike was saying, the first way to be able to create a template is to go, and here it is, here's the test plan, and we've got the announcements web part, the shared documents, the tasks, the members, and the links. And of course, if we wanted to change that, we could add a web part to it or whatever. And then once we were done, we could go into the site settings for this site. And if we said, hey, this is what we want to make this one available. Remember, of course, you can do all kinds of things. I'm assuming that maybe you've looked in here, which maybe isn't true. Just inside of here, you can change the title, you can change the icon, so on and so forth. And if you want to change look and feel even more, you can associate different CSS with this. Another thing you could do is you could change the master page, which again, if you're doing ASP.NET 2.0, you'd be familiar with that. Which is, if you're not, it's basically just it's a templated page with fixed settings and variable settings. So, for example, the top title bar is usually fixed, and the left navigation bar is fixed, and then the right content area is usually flexible. So here's just a master, and you could associate with a different master if you wanted to. That's a typical way to change look and feel. So if your company's business requirements are such that you do not want the standard SharePoint look and feel, that's very easy to change in here, is really what I'm trying to emphasize. You have themes, so on and so forth. So once you're happy with your site, then it's just as simple as save site as template. Okay, and notice the file name, STP. So I'm going to call this Lynn Test, and template name, Test for Lynn. And then description. And then you notice you have the option to include content. Okay, and that would be if you had specific data items in the announcements web part, for example, then that data would be included. And to give you a business implementation of where I actually use this is I was the coordinator for some virtual teams that worked at some technical shows before I joined Microsoft. And what we did is we created a template for each show type. So, this type of show had this template, this type of show had that template. And it really became a knowledge base for us, as well as a functional site, because when the show iterated, we simply just used template for show X. And it was really, very simple, and it worked great. So I'm going to say, okay, Lynn Test. And then this site will be available in the site template gallery for this particular portal instance. And there it is. So then if I wanted to create additional sites, I could then use the site that I just made as a basis. So there's a whole lot you can do without even going into a programming environment. And it's really, really important to look at that as a developer before you start working on stuff from a programming aspect. Let me go back to slides. And while I'm doing that, Mike, how are our questions looking?
Pretty good. We got a couple in here.
Okay.
But one of the points is that when you're using these templates and creating a template for a site, an example that I'd heard was like a college or a university that you have a bunch of professors. Each professor has their own set of classes and notes and all the stuff like that. That once you figure out what you want it to look like, you can save whatever it is as a template, and then people can then go through and modify them.
Right. Right. I mean, it's basically like if you've done any like object-oriented programming, it's conceptually like a base class. So you have a base class, and then you create an instance of the base class, but without writing any code. Basically, then you go create a new template, and that template will be available in the template pick list, just like a new site, and then you create a site there.
One of the questions is there a limit as to how much stuff we can put into a STP file?
No.
So it's just really whatever kind of content you want to be able to put in there. And then the ability to go out and actually load up the templates. Are you going to be showing how you copy those into the gallery?
Notice it got copied automatically. So when you create a template from within a SharePoint portal instance, it gets copied into that gallery automatically. Now, if you create a template from one of the development environments, then it's a little bit different process. And when we move into that, we will take a look at it. So. Okay, so let's keep on going here then. So as I just showed, customizing within SharePoint itself, and that's within both WSS and the full MOS, the template capability that I've shown so far. So save the site as template, modify your base templates, and then work with the Fantastic 40. And I liked that suggestion of getting the Fantastic 40 into the virtual PCs. I thought that was pretty cool. So good idea. Okay, so in terms of the Fantastic 40, there's tons and tons of links out there, and I tried to edit them all intelligently and get it down to like 5 really useful links. I did a lot of sort of pre-work for this webcast to save you guys time who are listening in, and I'll be putting that on my blog right after the presentation today. Basically, you can see here, this is just one of the useful links. Basically, you can see that all the templates are available in English. I'm not sure everybody listening in needs them only in English, but some of them are in multiple languages. And we have some that are for, we have them classified basically by business needs, so site administration, server administration. And each of the links allows you to download individual if you don't want all 40, gives you a sample so you can look at it. I mean, it's pretty well documented. So it's just something that you as developers need to really, really be aware of before you start making your own templates. We've done a lot of work out there, and there's no use for you to duplicate what's already been done.
Hey,
Okay.
Lynn.
Yes.
The STP file itself, we've got a question in here is talking about what is actually contained in it. It's a zipped archive of content where an ASPX is more of an HTML type of a page.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You can always think of it like a CAB file.
Mm-hmm. So it's literally a collection of content that is available.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to keep on going here. So we're going to move now into the next section, which is from a developer standpoint, how do we, once we've downloaded or customized or whatever we've done, or maybe nothing, maybe we're going to start from scratch. But honestly, from my production experience, I would try to refrain from starting from scratch. It's just not a good use of your time. Even if you just download one of the Fabulous 40 that you like the look of it, the CSS, and you rip out all the web parts, there's just been a lot of effort that's gone into this already, and there's no use for you really to start from nothing. But if you want to, you could. So whether you open something to customize or whether you start from nothing, your two development environment choices are SharePoint Designer or Visual Studio. So, as I said, in SharePoint Designer, you can customize existing or create new. SharePoint Designer, if you're not familiar, is a tool that looks like FrontPage. We no longer have FrontPage. It's not a product that we have in the 2007 world. If you're doing non-SharePoint web development, in other words, just classic ASP web development or really actually more design, our tool is called Expressions Web Designer. It's a new tool. So we've got two different tools in this space. SharePoint Designer, it really should be called SharePoint Designer/Developer. It is specific for SharePoint. Looks like FrontPage. There's nothing that you really need to do to it to be able to support creating or customizing templates. It's ready to go right out of the box, and it comes as part of the Office suite. In Visual Studio 2005, you can customize or create templates, but you've got to install some add-ons. At a very minimum, you're going to install the SharePoint Server Software Development Kit, SDK, or the Enterprise Content Management Kit. The documentation on our site says, and I think correctly, although I didn't validate it because I had installed the Enterprise Content Management Kit, that the SDK, the latest version, supersedes the ECM, but it actually includes the latest version of it. So if you get the SharePoint SDK, you're good. And one other thing that's not on the slide is you also have to get the WSS SDK. So there are two SDKs that you need to get, the MOS SDK and the WSS SDK. Now, if you wish to include some of the specific types of content in your templates, for example, workflow, then in Visual Studio you also have to download the Workflow Designer. So I've got links on my blog, again, talking about how to set up a SharePoint development environment. And from a practical point, it's usually about 4 or 5 pieces that you need to download. Also, if you are setting up SharePoint development environment, do be aware that SharePoint itself requires a server product to run on. So you will set it up in a, usually, because most developers don't have a server operating system on their desktop, in a virtual PC on your Vista box or XP box. So in other words, you'll get Virtual PC, which is a free download from us, then Windows Server 2003 or Longhorn when it comes, and then whatever design or developer tools. So that's why I recommend looking at the virtual labs, because it does take a little bit of time to set up a development environment, and if you are just getting started, you may not have that time. Maybe you do. So, okay, so let's now go over to SharePoint Designer. And as I'm going over there, Mike, how are questions looking?
Hold on a second.
Okay.
There was a question here.
Okay.
Talking about the limitation of templates. When I go out and create a template to include custom views, custom web parts, and permissions and things like that, if I save that as a template, those permissions are still there, right?
Yes.
So however it's saved, there's not really a limitation.
Well, if I remember correctly, when we saved this site as a template, and we can just go back to it, there was an option about permissions, but let me make sure, because I don't want to speak incorrectly here. So let me go to the site settings on the site, and we were going to save it as a template. And it looks like the permissions will go because you don't have an option to turn it off.
That's what I thought. The other thing is that all the templates and stuff like that we're creating, that's a function of WSS, not necessarily MOS.
Matter of fact, let's actually, I want to show you something that I found. Can you see this okay? How does this look? Do I need to make it a little smaller?
Hold on a second. This is, let's see. I can scroll around. I don't have it F5. Let me do that.
Okay. Well, what I want to do is I want to drill in, and I don't know if you guys can see this. It's
a little bit big, but if you use the scroll bars on the edges of the screen, you can get to the full thing.
Yeah, the very top part is showing you, this is a poster that I'm going to put a link to on my blog. The very top part, because I get this question so frequently, is a link to the feature set that is MOS only. So business intelligence, business process integration, so on and so forth. Going below that, if you scroll to the very right, where it starts with provisioning, SharePoint data store and all that, that's the WSS. So specific, and I'm going to make it big now so it's going to freak you out if you're scrolling. Sorry. What we're specifically looking at today is we're looking at this provisioning. Can you see that? How's that? Okay. So that's under, as Mike was just saying, that's WSS. And this is where we're basically going right now. We're going into site and template provisioning through our developer tools. So we're going to be looking at creating sites from XML definitions, the OneNet XML. Lists we can do as well, or user-created site templates, the STPs. And then we're going to look at deploying site definitions on servers just really briefly. And one of the things that's interesting about this poster is, and I'm going to, sorry, I'm probably freaking everyone out here. I'm going to make it big and move it over again. Oops, sorry. Just a cool poster. Ugh, made it too big. On the very bottom right, I can get it over there. The colors mean something. Can you see the key? You see where it says on the very bottom right here, WSS V2 features sites. It's in red. Yeah. So
you have to scroll over. If your screen is set to 1024 by 768, you got to scroll down and over.
Yeah. Well, in any case, I'm not going to take any more time on this, but I found this to be really, really a well-designed poster, and I'm going to be getting one and carrying it around with me because I get so many questions on this, and I think this might be helpful for some of our people listening in. So, yeah, this is a WSS thing. Okay. That being said, let's go back now, and let's go back to our virtual PC, which hopefully will look good on everybody's screen. We're looking okay, Mike?
Yep, we're doing good.
Okay. And let's open up SharePoint Designer. And inside of here, I'm going to go to the File menu, and I'm going to make a new website. And this supports ASP.NET websites as well as SharePoint. And you might be a little confused on that because I just said that Expressions Web is our sort of design-focused developer ASP.NET tool. And the reason that it does is because we've got this 100% compatibility between ASP.NET and SharePoint. And, you know, we're trying to help ASP.NET developers understand that SharePoint is just not for intranets. It basically can be a jumpstart or a basis for public-facing websites. And if you're wondering about that, one of the things to know is that, for example, the authentication for SharePoint by default is Windows, so obviously that wouldn't work in public-facing website. But because it is ASP.NET 2.0 compliant, you have the ability to plug in custom membership providers. So you can use forms authentication, for example. So in other words, we're blending the two together so that you can use this as part of your menu for ASP.NET development. So that's why we have the general and the templates, and these are ASP.NET templates. Now, notice where we're looking right now. So if we look for SharePoint templates on the drive, we're not going to find any because, of course, where are all SharePoint objects kept? They're kept in a database. So we're going to have to browse, and we're going to have to go out to our SharePoint site and then see we're retrieving the templates out of the database, the SQL database. So then we can work with our templates inside of the designer. And while these are loading, and there you can see, so these are all of our various templates that are available. So we can start with any of the templates inside of here, and then we can have the full design environment. So let's say, for example, a very common one that you'd want to customize would be a document workspace. And we're going to say OK. And it says, we can't create a site here because we're at the top level. We need to create a site in a sub-level or a child level. So let's make a child level. Let's call this test 1. Say OK. And now this is rendering out the content for a default document library. So it's basically creating a site for us. So if you've not seen the sort of structure of the site, and we had that earlier question about, the STP. What's the STP? What's in it? Well, here you go. This is what's in it. What you're going to be most interested in is the default ASPX, which is the UI page, if you will. And if you're new to this environment, you'll see that it's kind of Visual Studio-like in that it has toolbox and has error information on the bottom here. There's really strong support in SharePoint Designer for CSS because there is this visual aspect to it. So if you're like me and you're not a visual person at all, maybe you have somebody in your organization that is more focused on the look and feel, and you're going to want to get them involved with working with this. If they're a CSS pro, then maybe you are. When one of the earlier webcasts in our series, Mike, I think it was the first or the second one, Mike did a really great job going over the CSS features inside of SharePoint Designer. And all of our series is available for download, so you can pull that out and take a look if that's of interest to you.
Sure, and if you want to get to the links, go out to either one of our blogs.
Yeah. So inside of here, you can see we've got the split view, and I'm actually going to go into design view because we have this kind of small real estate going on here. And here we have a document workspace. So the idea of this is to expose this in a easy to work with visual way so that you can use, and I'll get rid of the style sheets over here so you can see, HTML controls. This should look very Visual Studio-like, assuming most of our audience uses Visual Studio. Form controls. These are the same controls that you're familiar with, and of course the difference between HTML and ASP.NET controls is HTML controls just are based on HTML, and ASP.NET controls are render on the server side. So we could drag them onto the design surface and work with them in any way that we want to because SharePoint is ASP.NET 2.0 compliant. Now in addition to these ASP.NET controls, we have special classes of controls, and we looked at these a little bit last week in terms of web parts, because one of the things that you want to think about when you're customizing sites and templates, kind of a paradigm shift for you as developers, is not necessarily just throw controls on a page. Rather, it's preferred to create web parts. And that's why we did the series in this order. And if you weren't here last week, I'll just get a minute or two on a web part. Basically, each one of these little chunks is a web part. And a web part, as I said, is a container that renders some type of UI, and it's a container for one or more controls. Now, why you would rather make a web part rather than just drag a control on this page, for example, is because there is functionality that is part of SharePoint that web parts take advantage of. And what is some of this functionality if you're not familiar with it? I should actually open this up so you can see it. Because I don't want to assume. I know some of you will know this, but some of you might not. So, because it's really important. You pick the right tool for the job. So I'm on a page here, and if I'm going to customize a page, I'm going to add a web part. So, think of this in contrast to a typical ASCX control. You couldn't really do this on an ASPX page with an ASCX control. There's no sort of default gallery feature, and there is with web parts. So users who have permission can make significant customizations to their SharePoint pages. And this is a pretty new paradigm for, let's say, intranet websites or sort of work-facing websites, but it is actually quite prevalent on the public internet. And I don't know how many of you use these social networking applications that are popping up right and left, and we have some in our live sphere of applications. I know currently, since we're partnering with these guys, I feel comfortable talking about it. My new sort of addiction is Facebook, so it's a fun thing to play with. And basically, it's a very similar paradigm. You have this sort of public-facing website with these mini little applications or chunks of content that you can drag onto the page. Now, why am I talking about this? Because the paradigm shift not only is necessary for you as a developer to design your templates differently, in other words, rather than just drag controls and make web parts, it's also, of course, important for your users. I mean, if the users don't use the gallery, there's sort of no point in making it. And really what I'm saying is I'm seeing a shift coming from the public internet that's driving this type of user interface. And I don't know, Mike, do you have any favorite sort of applications out there on the web that have this kind of this interface that you like to play with? I know, like I said, I'm currently just spending way too much time on Facebook.
I really haven't had a chance to dive into it as deep yet. I know that there's like the Second Life is supposed to be a thing to be checking out, and a few others.
Yeah. Well, it's just the sort of the way that users are going to expect to interact with your application. And the question really becomes, is this something that your users would find useful? So that's sort of one reason to use web parts. Another reason to use web parts is because of the whole permissioning structure built into web parts, where you have a web part gallery, and when you install a web part, and this is more from the administrative side, but it's important for you as a developer to understand this, you set a permissioning level as to what the web part code can do in terms of what it can access outside of the SharePoint server. Like, for example, can it connect to a SQL server and retrieve data and so on and so forth, and also who can do what to the web part. In addition to adding and removing web parts also have the, I need to go back to the edit mode, the ability for authorized users to work with the properties. And again, this is all built into the web part framework. So I don't want to redo the whole web part webcast, but it is very relevant when you're thinking about doing customization of templates, because it's not obvious by looking at the controls that it might be a better thing to make web parts rather than just to throw some controls up onto this page. And what I'm trying to help you understand is it probably is a better thing to make web parts and then put the web parts on the page. Now, how would you do that? That's a good question, right? So I'm actually, let's see. Let me go, of course now I'm looking for it. There is a way in here, and I may have to come back to it, that actually will bring up the web part gallery. So it's hooked in. I'm just not remembering the sequence right now. I'll come back to it in just a second. But there is a way inside of the toolbox, a certain sequence, that when you access it, you then will see the web part gallery that I just showed you, this guy right here. When I go out, go back in. Basically, in this, inside of here, so you can just associate web parts with a template. Okay? So while I'm kind of thinking on that, let me show you one other thing. You also have the ability to work with server controls that are specific to SharePoint. So, for example, a SharePoint calendar view. So you may or may not know that from document libraries, that there is an ability, and again, just so I don't want to show you things that you're not familiar with. So let me go to the document library here and show you the calendar view. And if I go, let's see if there is one here. I'll create a quick view. So this is the really popular thing. And again, it's just built right in. It's somewhat analogous to a calendar control, you know? So you have a view name, and then it just becomes basically a calendar. So this is what this is. So if you had some sort of calendar, you could just drag it on. And notice when I pass my mouse over it, we've got Microsoft SharePoint Web Controls, SP Calendar, Data Source. And we just drag it right on here into the appropriate zone. And I have to get a zone that it would sit on, and then you could work with it. Now, of course, we are developers, so we should look at a little code. So let's look at the code behind this. And you can see that this is all really declarative in that it's kind of like working with ASP.NET 2.0 controls. So you've got the control itself, for example, web part pages : list view web part, run at server. It's a type of a control. And then basically this will emit the appropriate HTML for the particular browser environment. And then it's customized through the properties inside of here. So it's a very declarative sort of HTML-like model. And see, we've got ASP.NET controls right here mixed in as well. And here's our familiar, I don't know how, hopefully this is rendering okay, @ %, using C#. There's our master page. So this is all very familiar stuff, and we're inheriting from Microsoft SharePoint web part pages, so on and so forth. So the important takeaway out of this is that this design environment is your sort of starting point. Once you've got your templates from, within SharePoint or from downloading them or whatever, you can open up inside of here and then use the controls and further refine. That's sort of your secondary point. And sort of the tricky thing to remember is when you are creating the object, to remember that you want to use SharePoint templates and that you have to fetch the templates from the server. They cannot be retrieved from the drive. You have to fetch them from a server location. Okay, before we switch over to Visual Studio, Mike, how are we doing on questions?
I think we're pretty open right now. Some people are just asking you to maximize the virtual PC, and someone else was saying tips on creating a server farm for when we're doing this. I think that's got more to do with.
Yeah, let's
that's
take
off
one.
Topic. So.
Yeah, after the webcast. Okay,
yeah.
Well, hopefully everybody's still awake. So we got a few more things to show. All right, so now let's go to Visual Studio. Wouldn't be a developer webcast if we didn't go there. Oh, one other thing I want to show really quick, and this is part of the enterprise content management. I'll just show that what it is. Basically, you can download this. Again, this is if you're inclined to make templates from scratch. This is called the SharePoint Solution Generator. It's part of the enterprise content management download. And you see site definition. I'm just not even going to run. I'm just going to go really fast so that we have time. And basically, you're going to choose the site instance you'd like to create a site template from, or specify a site URL. And then this is going to generate, because somebody was asking about like what's in the STP files. Basically, you just hook up to an existing URL location, and then this will generate the STPs on your desktop. So if you want to crack it open and take a look at it. And this is called the SharePoint Solution Generator. And it's part of the ECM, the Enterprise Content Management free download toolkit. Okay, so let's get out of there. All right, now let's go to Visual Studio. This is Visual Studio 2005, and we've installed the extensions for SharePoint services. Because we want workflows in our templates, we've installed the extensions for Windows Workflow as well. And let's say new. Now, this is sort of interesting. In SharePoint Designer, there's this deliberate merging of ASP.NET 2.0 and SharePoint. So, get a web page template, get a SharePoint template. In Visual Studio, there's no such merging. Because if it were consistent, you'd think, well, if I'm going to make something new in SharePoint, I'd make a new SharePoint website. Well, you'd be looking for a long time because it's not there. Okay? So I'll just bring it up and show you. So to be clear, you could create an ASP.NET website with web pages that you could then deploy to a SharePoint site. But you'd have to manually deploy them, actually as something called a feature. If you want to create a site template, you go to Project, and you go to under your preferred language, and I'm using Visual C# for this. You go to SharePoint, and when you've installed the SDK, then you will get the ability to make a blank site definition. Notice the other objects inside of here. You have a team site definition, a list, an empty, a web part, and you have your workflows. Okay?
Hey, Lynn, could you make your VPC a little bit bigger and maybe move the screen to the left a little bit for a better view?
I could. See? This is why there are two of us, so we get this good feedback.
And the eyes that aren't looking.
How's that? Is that better?
Let's see. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's do a team site definition. So we've selected that as our template, and we're going to open that guy up. while this is rendering, questions? Got a quiet group today. Everybody must be heading out for the pool.
I think so. Pretty quiet. We had quite a few questions, but I've been able to keep up with them.
Okay, you've been just keeping up. Okay, great. Okay, so here we go. We are inside of our team site. So let's first look at the references so that we can see what's sort of new and exciting here. We got system, system.web, system.xml, which you would expect in ASP.NET. But we have Microsoft.SharePoint and Microsoft.SharePoint.security. Now, one of the things that we won't really be covering in detail because it's more of an admin thing, but it will come into play when you are creating custom templates and installing them, is in addition to regular sort of user security and URL security or site level security, SharePoint uses something called code access security, which is security set at the level of an individual group of DLLs. So it is rolled up, and basically it's specified through a configuration file. This is sort of the world of admins, but again, you as developers have to get this stuff working. There's great references on TechNet, and I can try to add something as well to the list of references that I put out, but that's why you have that. And the reason is to make it really secure, because your SharePoint template might contain web parts that go out and connect to your, Oracle database or your Siebel customer management database or whatever. And so you want to make sure that those web parts can't be used maliciously and data can't be retrieved in a way that you don't want to. So in any case, so that's your references. And then underneath the site definition container, you've got two objects. You've got your default.aspx, so something familiar, finally. And then you have the mysterious onenet.xml. And this architecture, the XML as a basis, really started in SharePoint 2003. And at least we have better documentation, I have to be honest with you. When this came out in 2003, it was really challenging to work with the OneNet. And it's still not the most friendly thing in the world. The OneNet is your sort of basis template from which your, in this case, team site definition is being created. So we'll look at both, not too much because we don't have that much time, and we're not going to spend that much time looking at an XML file. So first we'll look at the default, and you might be surprised to see that it's pretty boring looking. Basically, you have just a bunch of containers. Now onto these containers, you can place, again, controls, or, and this ties into what I talked about last week, you could, preferred, place web parts. And again, not redoing last week's webcast, but web parts generally will use a web part manager control as a master container, and then a web part zone. So if you've gotten into, for example, the Ajax stuff, you're familiar with the Ajax script manager control, which is kind of like the traffic cop for the Ajax stuff. Kind of the same for the web part manager. It handles some of the glue. So into these content containers, you can put, web parts, or you can put, standard controls. So you do your design, whatever it is you want it to be, and then you are going to work with your events. So before we move over there, let's just briefly look at the OneNet. So the OneNet basically just is the glue that gives you the core SharePoint functionality. So let me try to find something interesting in here. Can you tell I don't like to read XML files? Mike, do you like to read XML files?
Love it. And don't get enough, right?
You're a geek. You're a geek.
Gotta be.
Yeah, I know, huh? Okay, here's an example. Site features. Okay, so this is for this particular template, this node says that a feature with this GUID is enabled, is part of this. And this is because we built the template from the base definition. So this would be a core basic web part, as it says, and this is a 3-state workflow. These are you can think of as base objects. These features are available. Now features is a new concept with SharePoint 2007. Basically a way to package up objects and to move these objects and make them available to whatever MOS instance you want. So you can package up web parts as features, you can package up workflows as features, you can package up templates as features. Again, that could be a whole separate webcast. I'm going to give you references on how to do it. Once you're done designing, you're going to package this guy up as a feature, and that's how you're going to deploy it out. Okay? Okay, so anyway, so this is saying which features are available for this particular template. So with the OneNet, edit with fear and trepidation. Just from my production experience, it's really easy to make a breaking mistake in here, relatively obscure. So try to refrain from editing the OneNet. I try not to look at it whenever I don't have to. Okay, let's go over to the events being associated here, and this is under the site provisioning handler. So the base one basically is just unactivated. So you can see we've got passing in the SPS feature receiver properties. And this is when a feature is activated, do something. So again, understanding sort of the taxonomy of SharePoint is half the battle. So knowing that features are web parts or workflows. So for example, you could say when a particular workflow type instance was activated, then do X, Y, and Z and make that part of the template. It really is kind of a different world than classic ASP.NET because we've got these new sort of more sophisticated parts and pieces, and we can react to the events that are surrounded on those. This is just showing sort of the basic thing. Since we are, in developer webcast, and you guys have told me you want more detail, so I'm trying to give you more detail. Let's look at the internal CS file here. And I'm not going to actually pop this open, but I will just show you here that you really do have a fine level of granular control if you have these sort of business needs. So you can see on feature activated, on feature deactivating, feature installed, feature uninstalling. Okay? So really a lot of control around features. So it is extremely important when you're working with templates that you figure out which features you want to associate, which translates into which objects you want to associate with the template, and then what you want to do when these particular features have changes made to them. And you can see you've got some other things in here like get a list of all the features that are available, work with the CSS, work with the web properties, so on and so forth. And this is really just a subset of what you can do. Another thing that I want to just call your attention to is we get into attribute information here, and a lot of times when you're working with SharePoint features, you're going to be working at the level of the GUID. So it's just a really common thing that you see in design. Also note the namespace references. You've got Microsoft SharePoint, SharePoint administration, web part pages, and again, always security. So, all right, so let's pop back. And any questions? Are people just completely sleeping? Have they left? What's going on, Mike?
Well, we got a few questions here, but
okay.
I think some of these are going to be answerable once you get done here in 5 minutes.
Okay, well, is there anything relevant to where I'm at?
It says that the master page is not part of the site definition. So is there any good resource to understand the content of the master page in MOS? I guess that's using the SharePoint Designer more than anything else.
Yeah. It starts again. Developer education is kind of like, I consider it like a building a house. You got to build the foundation first, and you got to build the walls and the first floor and the second floor. And I find a lot of people working with this really haven't had time to get into ASP.NET 2.0. So that's why I started the webcast with this. You got to go out there and dig in and see how to use master pages in ASP.NET 2.0. It's not super hard, but you're going to be happy with what you see. And like Mike said, I think you're probably going to want to use SharePoint Designer for master pages because of the CSS stuff. Okay, what else?
All right. So we've got, let's see. Do you want to finish up what you've got? Because some of these are like, are we going to be doing the webcast,
okay.
packaging stuff?
Okay.
Just a couple of other things that are.
Okay. Well, that's pretty much, what I had to show. That's why I was looking for questions.
One of the questions on OneNet XML is, can you define which features are enabled in the site template?
Yeah, the features that are listed on the feature section in OneNet XML are the ones that are enabled by default. And if you want additional features to be part of your template, then you're going to have to put them in OneNet XML. That's why I went and showed that.
Right. So that's where you actually do that.
Yeah, and you have to do it at the level of the GUID. So.
Did you want to actually show that, or is that?
Well, I can, but I'll just pop over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you got any more.
Yeah, no problem. So here we are.
Here we are.
We're back over here. Let's see if we can find those speeches. Let's see. Features. Okay, so here we go, and this is just, you just basically put them in here. This the OneNet XML makes the features available, so you need to add them, and that's why when you open up a template of type team site definition, part of the default files that you get are the OneNet XML because you may have to edit it. You may have to add the features.
Okay.
So maybe I wasn't really clear on that. So good question.
Okay.
Okay.
One other question is dealing with the difference between using a site generator other than using it to create a website.
Okay, so the question is, why would you use that site generator? Is that kind of, okay. The reason I've used the site generator, and I think they're talking about this thing here, which is the solution generator, is to look at what somebody else had done. And this is maybe from my consultant background, but come in and look at what somebody had done from a customization standpoint and look at the files. Because remember, it gives you, and I know I didn't run the whole thing, but it gives you a STP file, which you can and then put out, somewhere on your drive, and then you can open it up, and then you can see all of the underlying associated files for a particular site definition. And then it's a great place to start when you want to, make a more customized version of something that's already there, make a change to something that's already there, because it makes a copy, and you can take a look at it. So I found it to be a good tool. Okay, what else?
Let's see. One has got to do with forefront server security and SharePoint deployment.
Well, it's that one later.
Yeah, we'll do that later, and that's all. That's what
okay,
we've got
great. Well,
right
I
now.
think we're going to move to the summary then, because we covered pretty much what we wanted to. So SharePoint sites and templates are used as containers for web parts. That was something I really wanted to get across today, and hopefully I did. You can just drag controls on there, but it's a better design structure to use web parts. So if you want to know more, download my webcast from last week. Workflows are also part of templates, and like I said, that's coming up on July 7th. And I showed you the various ways sites and templates can be customized, and we talked about how they can be downloaded. So lots of different places. One of the things in general with SharePoint, and it's hard for us to break these old habits, but you do not want to just open up Visual Studio. There are, you want to do steps A, B, C, and D before that, because opening up Visual Studio and starting editing OneNet.xml is not a great use of your time until you've explored all your other options. SharePoint development is generally a mix of sort of customizing through the GUI and through the designers, and then writing some code. But it's a mix of the two, and that's really, really important to understand. So we're going to have some resources post webcast here. I have a bunch of links to put up on my blog, and then Mike has that as well. And let's see where we're at. Also, if you are interested in other dev topics, to let you know, our live event starting in actually August, that slide isn't exactly right, August through I think around Christmas time, we're going to be talking about Silverlight and Windows Communication Foundation and Link. So those registrations should open up pretty soon on www.msdnevents.com, and we'd love to see you come out to some of the events. I've seen some of you at some of my events. You said hello. I think that's really kind of cool. So hopefully you'll continue to come out. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our webcast producer, and then we'll stay on the line to answer questions after she's done.
Yeah, Molly, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
All yours. Hello.
Are you still there? Did we lose her?
I think we lost her.
No, I'm here. Sorry about that audio problem.
We're going to go to the questions and answers. If you have questions that you want to get answered, go ahead and submit them in the spot where you click your answers, and Lynn and I will stick around and answer questions until we can answer them all. Make sure that you fill out the survey. The survey is where we get feedback from what you thought of today, and also you can give us suggestions as to what you'd like to see. You can also get information on upcoming and previously live webcasts by going out to the www.microsoft.com/webcast link. And if you have ideas for content, just go ahead and let us know by going out to the other link that's on the same page.
Thank you very much, Mike. All right, I'm going to also be launching a survey here in a moment. So And just to remind you again, yes, that by completing by completing the survey, you will be entered to win this Microsoft Zoom. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lynn and Mike for any other questions, and then I'll come back on for the closing. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, I see some questions in the queue, so I'm going to go ahead and answer some of those. Let's see. So first thing, does SharePoint security have to be configured indifferently when Forefront server for SharePoint is deployed? Mike, I know a little bit about that. Do you want to say anything before I jump in?
I actually was kind of hoping you'd have the answer.
Okay. I'm not a security expert. I'm not a network admin expert anymore. You know, I can't stay up on all that stuff. But I have a friend who is, and I talked to her about it. And the short answer for Stephen's question is yes, it does. And there is documentation out on the TechNet site now about changes for SharePoint security working with Forefront. So that's actually a really, really great question, and I'm glad that he asked that. So the short answer is yes. I wish I had more specifics. I do not, but there you go. Okay, so looks like we're piling up here. So, all right, next one. Hi, Fred. I've got all your emails. I'm going to answer them. How can we define features to be enabled in a site template in onenet.xml? Hopefully I already answered that one, Fred. You just add the GUID. Okay, and some praise. We always like that. Thank you. From Kemi, are you going to have a webcast on packaging workflow into features? You do not want us to finish this series, do you, Kemi? We could. We don't have it on the schedule, but we'll take your suggestion under consideration. So thanks for that. From Ayub, WCF and Silverlight webcast, will it be related to how to use it in SharePoint? Actually, to be clear on that, Ayub, we're going to do live presentations rather than webcasts as part of our MSDN commitments. So they'll be like at movie theaters, basically, and they won't be webcasts.
Well, actually, the members of our team will also be doing webcasts along these same topics that we do each quarter.
That's true.
Generally speaking, you'll find a series of webcasts on different topics, and the WCF and Silverlight will probably be picked up and covered by someone. Follow our blogs, and if I come across a good set of those, I'll make sure to add it to my blog.
Right, and the other thing I want to say, because I do get a lot of questions about this, is if you're interested in looking at AJAX integration with SharePoint, go to the ASP.NET site and get the AJAX Futures CTP, because it's already available. It's like a beta. Basically, it's community technology preview. So good point. We'll take that we'll consider that. From Ed, web features created by OneNet. What is OneNet? Okay, to be more clear on that, OneNet allows enablement of features that you have created. So in other words, the feature has to exist, and then in the OneNet, what you're basically saying is for this specific template, this feature can be used. And a feature could be, for example, a web part, or it could be a workflow, or a content store. So basically, web features are not created by OneNet. They are enabled by OneNet. Okay, from Da, will you show how to take the ASP development through Visual Studio and merge that with prepackaged SharePoint sites? Ooh, that's a big question. There isn't really a facility for merging. What you're maybe thinking is incorporating a standard ASP.NET page inside of a site. And that's actually not really difficult to do. You can actually do that from the SharePoint GUI itself. So I'll try to put a link up. I believe there's like a screencast on how to do that. So I'll try to add that to my notes. From Kemi again, are you going to have a webcast on branding, customizing core CSS? That's kind of interesting. The question that we get is, I want to use SharePoint, but I don't want it to look like SharePoint. So I think that's probably where you're going with that one. I want it to look like my company. And we're getting that quite frequently. So Kimmy, you have great suggestions. I can't say that I'm going to give you a definite date, but I'm saying I'm hearing your suggestions, and I'll be working on that.
You know, Lynn, on the third webcast we did on the series, I did the where we went through the master pages, which dived a little bit into the core CSS stuff.
That's true.
So if you haven't seen that, I mean, that might be a good place to start. And then if it's still not what you're looking for, go ahead and let us know, and we'll look at extending this webcast series. We got I've got a few ideas too. So
keep on going. Okay, from this next person, let's see. I was wondering if I could review PDF files from all the SharePoint events of you and Lynn. I think Mike has a more complete listing on his blog, www.benkotips.com. He has almost the entire series, and I don't know if you could update that, Mike, so put the links to all of them on your blog.
I should be able to get it so that you can go out and register for any of the previous ones, and then I'll extend the. I don't have the last two up there yet. I'll add those and then the new ones.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So thanks for that. And from Ed, can you integrate WPF integrated into MOS 2007? Is it only for client-side development? This can be Silverlight for Web, which is integrated into MOS 2007. Well, you would be looking at Silverlight rather than WPF. You're right on that. And to be honest with you, I would say yes, but I can't give you more specifics because I am frankly working on learning Silverlight myself. But I'm getting that question a lot. So you can look for information on my blog as I get more immersed in it. I don't know, Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
I know that the Silverlight is still pretty early out there, so it's still being evolved. I know the data binding is being added. There's a few pieces that are coming that'll make it more integratable.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're going to do it, but it's just a question of when.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so Ayub, where can I find more of the deployment of templates from one? Oh, okay, so Ayub is, where can I find more info about deployment of templates from one machine to another? TechNet. I'll put a link on my blog on that. There's really good documentation on that. Also, Matt Hester, who does what we do, but he's from the TechNet team, he's done a series of administrative SharePoint webcasts, and I probably just need to link those on my blog because lots of these questions are answered by his series. Okay, Kemi needs more information on branding. Okay, we hear you, and we like the thanks. That's good. And from Ed, SharePoint Solution Generator, what is it as a part of ECM? Is it just looking for site folder structure? As far as I know, it is part of ECM, so that's one reason you'd have to download ECM in addition to the SharePoint SDK. I don't remember it being part of the SharePoint SDK. And what it's doing is it reads an existing structure and then makes those files available for you as a developer so you can crack them open. All right. Well, I think we've got everyone. So thank you very much for listening in, and hope to talk with you again next week. Thanks.
And we'll look at adding more webcasts to the series. So thank you, everyone. And Ailey, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you again, Lynn and Mike. Also, if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, you may print the PDF by going to the File menu in the upper navigation bar. I'd like to remind everyone again to take a moment to fill out the survey prior to exiting. You can now disconnect from the audio portion of this meeting. Thank you.